Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable always in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Please be seated. As you know, this past week I traveled with my Wabash pastoral leadership cohort to southern Texas to see firsthand the immigration experience. We 14 pastors had a rich experience, hearing perspectives from many individuals and organizations in the Rio Grande Valley. Now, I admit to having some mixed emotions about our current immigration situation, and I can vacillate between support of to opposition to, depending on the details of a specific scenario. We were blessed to also meet with people on both sides of that topic as well. Everyone we met with, however, agreed that the current situation is simply unacceptable. On our first day in McAllen, we met with Sister Norma Pimentel. Sister Norma is a Roman Catholic nun who was raised in the valley and continues to live there. Sometime along in her ministry, after the terror of 9/11 and its subsequent changes to our national security, it became increasingly obvious to her that people coming into the United States at the Mexican border were often in need of simple things like a safe place to sleep, a shower, and food. She approached a local business owner with an empty building in downtown McAllen near the bus station and began what is now known as Catholic Charities McAllen. Excuse me. In partnership with others who feel called to assist with this growing crisis, this ministry currently serves a couple of thousand people a day. These are people, often families with small children, that have made it through the process of applying for refugee or asylum status and are preparing to travel out to various locations around the country to live while they await their court dates to pursue a legal path to becoming a citizen. These people in this mission are offered food, shelter, showers, medical care as necessary, and then they quickly depart by bus or airplane to other locations of the United States. According to Times Magazine, Sister Norma was named one of the nation's 100 most influential people in the year 2020 for her work in the Rio Grande Valley. Dressed in her navy blue nun's habit, Sister Norma was a humble and quiet woman. We had to gather close around her to even hear her gentle but forceful words. And she is known by all in the valley and in the adjacent regions of Mexico. She tells us this simple fact, that all she did was look, recognize the need, and coordinate resources to meet the need. She implored us to share with our congregations to not believe everything we see and hear in the media is often exaggerated. And two, and most importantly, to remember that we are all humans loved by God. She emphasizes that connecting to our humanity is necessary for all of our survival, is critical for our salvation. That same day, we crossed the McAllen-Hidalgo Bridge into Reynosa, Mexico. The 14 of us plus 4 guides walked across the bridge into Mexico without any issue. Once there, we met with a local pastor who works in the area to coordinate care for the 2,000 or so hopeful immigrants that are living in the town square, praying for their chance to enter the promised land of the United States. They depend on others for food and water and a reasonably safe place to sleep in makeshift tents, literally only 2 or 3 blocks from the U.S. border. They work when and how they can, and some of them are registered in our immigration system and are awaiting notification of their appearance or their acceptance into the States. Some are simply there trying to survive until they can figure out what is next. Some are there waiting for one of the Mexican drug cartels to sneak them across the border for an exorbitant price. Most all of them would enter legally if they could. And all of them are willing to do whatever it takes for the possibility of a better life for themselves and specifically for their children. Now, seeing a family, seeing the children living in the hot sun with just tents or tarps to cover them from the burning sun, with laundry hanging on every available string, using provided porta-johns as their only facilities, I admit this was difficult for me to see. And yet most of them here in this plaza live in better circumstances in the tent city than from where they came. It's heart-wrenching to juxtapose the comfort of my delightful bed in my air-conditioned house with a large bathroom all to myself to an inflatable mattress on a cement slab with a porta-john. Sister Norma, who was also there on separate business when we were there, reminds us to see the humanity. We did that for sure. My meager little heart was and is wrung in knots for these people who just desperately want a chance to work, learn, and experience the American dream. The next day, we met with very different people. Our morning began at the Rio Grande River on the other side of the wall, which there was this fancy remote that opened it up and we could drive through. We felt a little illegal ourselves, but mind you, the wall is not exactly on the border. It's a few feet to several hundred yards into the United States. The place where we met was a known crossing for Mexican immigrants because, as you know, there are many kinds of immigrants trying to get through the southern border. It was interesting to learn that different places along the river are more commonly used by different nationalities, and many of them are controlled by the 5 major drug cartels of Mexico. The gentleman who runs the water facility there, where they pump water out of the river and pump it into McAllen to be used for the city, well, he had a very much less welcoming perspective on immigration. He shared a deep desire to keep them where they belong and to protect our great country. While 1% or less of the illegal immigrants that find their way into the United States are violent, those are often the ones that we would witness there at the pumping station. And they are certainly the ones that get captured on the news and blown up into the biggest stories. We clearly heard the fear in his voice as he discussed protecting his country, his employees, his family at all costs. At the same time, he also reflected upon a time in his youth when crossing back and forth across the border was a much simpler, safer, and commonplace practice. Many came across to work or to shop in both directions. We struggled to hear the humanity amidst his very real fear. Everyone agrees that the violent criminals need to be kept out. No one is exactly sure how to do that safely when many of the cartel leaders actually live and operate from within the United States nowadays. That afternoon, we met with 2 Border Patrol agents, and they clarified our perspective by sharing with us that crossing the border anywhere except for an entry point is illegal. If anyone, ourselves included, try to do that, they are to be detained and processed. If we were to even cross over the river and come back, we would have broken the law times 2, once by going into Mexico illegally, and then secondly by coming back to the United States illegally. These agents shared their fear for their safety due to the very real drug cartel presence. They acknowledge that more than 99% of the people entering the U.S. are simply trying to get a better life for themselves. But that remainder, those violent criminals, don't deserve to enter the U.S. At best, this situation is immensely complex. When asked directly what might help this crisis, every single person we interviewed gave us the same iteration of these two things. One, process people more quickly instead of dragging out that process for days, weeks, months, sometimes even years. There would be fewer people at the border waiting and fewer people in such devastation. And secondly, of course controversial, if we raise the number of people who can legally enter the country and work while they're awaiting processing, then the masses at the border would diminish. This would reduce illegal immigrants and allow the legal immigrants to be better tracked, allow them to work, which they can't do at certain parts in their process, and to all of our enjoyment, allow them to pay taxes while they await their green card or citizenship. I don't know any answers. I just know what I heard and what I experienced. And as I mentioned before embarking on this adventure, I expected this trip to be challenging, and it was in many ways. It was 97 degrees one day, and this girl don't do that weather very well. I come back from the borderlands with more questions than answers. And with that perspective, and at the encouragement of our cohort leaders, perhaps this experience will help me, help all of us to have our eyes just a little more open to ways that we can support the marginalized, the immigrants among us. How can we be more aware of, more vigilant to the ways we can be servants to the very people that surround us? Maybe in these church walls, but definitely outside of these church walls. Our gospel passage today tells the story of James and John trying to secure their seats on either side of Jesus. You can imagine it, can't you? I mean, come on. In their minds, they likely wanted to be seen as just as wonderful and amazing as Jesus. I can't help but envision like this royal seat, this royal throne with Jesus in the middle and James and John on either side. At least I bet that's what they had in their minds. But you see, Jesus knows the truth. To be on his left and right means that they will be crucified with him on the cross. To be on his left and right means that they will die for their beliefs. To be on his left and right means that they must be last and not first. He tells them that the first will be last and the last will be first, and most importantly, that to be a follower of Jesus is to be a servant of all. Like Sister Norma and like Pastor Jonathan, even like us when we're at our best. A few weeks ago, Jean and I attended a training for a project in which we are participating called Church Buildings for Collaborative Partnerships. It's a gathering of Episcopal parishes from all over the state. We've partnered with the Diocese of Indianapolis. It's helping us to look at how we utilize our church building besides on Sunday morning, and how we might use the assets of our church and the assets that each of you bring to the table to more tightly connect ourselves to the community that surrounds us. I admit that it was humbling for Jean and I to hear of the outreach ministries shared by some of the other congregations. We each had to make a presentation. Now, granted, they're bigger and they're younger congregations, and we realized that fully, so we worked really hard not to compare ourselves to them too ferociously. At the same time, we can still reflect upon what God is, what God might be, or what God will call us to do as the faith community of St. Paul's in our very own location here at the corner of Harrison and Michigan. What that might be beyond our community dinners in support of the Salvation Army Food Bank. In case you've all forgotten about that, the basket's still out there. What that might be, we don't see too clearly in this moment. What is certain, however, is that if we look to see and we recognize the need around us, there are plenty of opportunities to model Jesus' servant ministry right here in our town. I pray ardently for us to see that and for our desire and the resources to respond to that. So, my friends, this trip to the borderlands was wonderful and exhausting, life-giving, and community building. But above all, it reminded me that we each have an opportunity to look around us, to see the need, to respond to the love of Christ, to be a servant as Jesus instructed. May our eyes and our ears and our hearts be open to this task, now and always. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.